The hiss of searing steel against flesh leaves a scent that never truly washes from the stones. It is a thick, sickening copper tang that settles deep into the damp mortar of the forge, lingering long after the embers have died. In the forgotten, fog-choked valleys of the Rhine, the old masters whispered a terrible truth beneath the rhythmic groaning of the bellows. Water can only cool a blade, but blood gives it a soul. To craft a weapon that would never shatter against the heavy iron of a warlord, the heat of the fire alone was not enough. It required a sacrifice. We find him in the suffocating dark of the smithy, a solitary figure draped in a hardened leather apron, his hands permanently stained with iron dust and old regret. With heavy tongs, he lifts a glowing billet of steel from the roaring charcoal. It pulses in the gloom like a dying, angry star. But he does not turn toward the wooden trough of brine. Instead, he turns to the shadows. There, bound by rusted chains and shivering in the freezing autumn draft, a condemned prisoner kneels on the cracked earth. This man has no name anymore. He is merely a vessel waiting for sudden, searing absolution. The smith hesitates for only a breath. The anvil has rung out all night like a tolling bell, measuring the rhythm of creation. But this heavy silence marks the exact moment a maker forsakes his own humanity. He steps forward. The incandescent steel is driven not into water, but plunged directly into the living, trembling chest of the captive. The agonizing scream is swallowed instantly by the suffocating roar of the furnace, leaving only a ragged, final exhale to echo against the walls. As the iron darkens from a blinding, divine white to a dull, bruised gray, it quietly drinks the life of the damned. The flesh sears, but the steel hardens, locking the raw terror of a dying man into its microscopic veins. The blade is perfect, unbreakable, cursed. It rests upon the cold anvil, smoking in the damp air, carrying a trapped, violent spirit within its newly sharpened edge. Yet flesh was not the only vessel used to anchor a soul to a weapon. Far from the valleys of the Rhine, across the frozen seas where the earth itself felt dead, other masters sought to bind much older ghosts to their steel. Pale ash drifts like winter frost across the cracked leather apron of the forge master, settling in the deep creases of his weathered skin. This is not the clean residue of oak or the fragrant soot of pine, but something far more hallowed and heavy. In the heart of the furnace, the white-hot embers devour the crushed bones of fallen kings, their ancient legacies reduced to a fine, shimmering dust that chokes the air. To the common eye, it is merely a fire, but to the man standing before the heat, it is a resurrection. In the damp, bone-shattering chill of a Scandinavian winter, an old widower works in a silence so profound it feels like a physical weight. The only sound is the rhythmic, agonizing scrape of a grooved stone against a human femur, a sound that echoes out into the frozen pines like a heartbeat. He is not merely crafting a weapon for a chieftain's belt or a huscarl's grip. He is attempting to cheat the finality of the grave. He is trapping the essence of his dead son within the very molecular fabric of the iron. As the ground bone is fed into the forge, the carbon fuses into the glowing metal, lending the sword a hardened, unbreakable edge that no simple iron could ever possess. This is the alchemy of grief. The smith's hammer falls with a desperate, loving precision, each strike a prayer to a god who has already turned away. But as the steel begins to cool, the triumph of the craft feels hollow. The blade does not shine with a holy light. It hums with a low, suffocating sorrow that vibrates through the hilt.
When the sword is finally unsheathed in the moonlight, it does not sing of victory or the glory of the feast hall. It weeps. It is a ghost locked within a cage of steel, a soul denied the peace of the halls of the ancestors. A sickly yellow smoke crawls along the low rafters of the Venetian forge, clinging to the damp stone like a living thing. It does not smell of the honest labor of coal and sweat, but carries the cloying, suffocating scent of bitter almonds and crushed nightshade. Here, in the salt-crusted labyrinth of the lagoon, the noble art of the forge has abandoned the sunlight of the battlefield. It has retreated into the damp shadows to embrace the quiet, calculated malice of the assassin. We see a pale artisan, his features obscured by a heavy linen veil to ward off the very vapors he creates, stirring a bubbling vat filled with a dark, swirling decoction of hemlock, belladonna, and the milk of vipers. The air is thick with a tension that transcends the heat of the furnace. This is not the work of a man seeking to defend a city, but a man crafting a sentence of death. The steel is worked with a cruel precision, not hammered into a solid singing spine, but folded and intentionally stressed to create thousands of microscopic, thirsty fissures along its surface. As the iron reaches a terrifying white-hot brilliance, it is not quenched in water or oil. Instead, it is plunged into the toxic brew. The metal screams as it meets the poison, drinking the venom deep into its molecular veins, thirsting for the ruin it was born to deliver. The resulting weapon is hauntingly beautiful, its surface shimmering with a treacherous, oily iridescence that dances like light on a stagnant pond. It is a blade of coward's grace. It requires no strength of arm, no bravery in the shield wall. It needs only the shallowest of cuts, a mere graze across a sleeping wrist or a crowded shoulder, to claim a soul. A sparrow, perhaps seeking refuge from the Venetian rain, falters in flight and drops dead from the rafters, a small feathered omen of the silent, inevitable rot this steel carries within its heart. But as the artisan wipes the toxic condensation from the hilt, he knows that even this silent malice is a terrestrial horror. There are weapons born of things far older and colder than human poison, blades that did not begin in a pot of herbs, but fell screaming from the stars themselves. The dull, hollow thud of a hammer striking a fallen star echoes through the monastic courtyard, a sound so unnatural it sends a black cloud of crows screaming from the bell tower. This is not the familiar iron of the earth, nor the rusted scrap of common warfare. This metal fell from the heavens in a streak of terrifying fire, burning through the veil of the world with the silent, freezing wrath of a distant god. In the center of the cloisters, a disgraced crusader, his white surcoat stained with the mud of 1,000 miles, and his vows of peace shattered like glass, wrestles with the unyielding celestial stone. His hands are blistered, his wool cloak frayed at the hem, but his eyes remain fixed on the strange pitted mass that hums with a lingering cosmic heat. The iron of men is weak, it yields to the warmth of oak and coal. But this star matter is stubborn, refusing to soften under ordinary flame. It demands a sacrifice of purity, a white-hot furnace fed by consecrated oils and resins stolen from the high altar. As the bellows groan, the forge reaches a temperature that turns the air into a shimmering ghost. Every strike of the mallet does not merely shape the metal, it draws out a blinding, jagged luminescence that casts long, distorted shadows against the cathedral walls. The knight's face is illuminated by a light that was never meant to touch the soil of this world. Slowly, painfully, the blade takes its form. It is heavy, jagged, and scarred by its violent journey through the void, carrying within its weight the cold, indifferent silence of the heavens. This is a weapon that rejects the grip of mortal hands, a sword that feels like a piece of the night sky made solid and sharp. As the final hammer blow falls, the crusader carries the finished blade into the nave, his footsteps echoing on the cold marble. He lays the celestial steel upon the altar, a gesture of hollow penance for the blood he has spilled. But as the metal touches the holy cloth, the cathedral candles do not flare in greeting. They flicker and die, as if the blade has swallowed the light of the room. It sits in the dark, a silent testament to a power that knows nothing of human prayer. Yet even this celestial terror requires a witness, a soul willing to lose itself in the absolute blackness of the forge, to find a truth that the eyes were never meant to see.
In the suffocating darkness of a sealed mountain cavern, time does not pass in hours, but in the slow, rhythmic clinking of steel against stone. There is no sun here, no flickering torch to guide the hand, only the oppressive weight of the earth and the scent of damp limestone. In the center of this void stands a master sword maker, his world reduced to the heat on his face and the silk cord wrapped tightly across his eyes. He has intentionally blinded himself, severing his connection to the world of light, to find a clarity that the eyes can only obscure. To forge a blade of such dangerous perfection, he must not see the metal, he must become it. The core of his labor is a dance of pure intuition. We feel the blistering heat of the coals radiating against his skin, a sharp contrast to the biting chill of the cave's floor. The air is thick with the smell of his own salt sweat, mingled with the sharp, resinous smoke of burning pine. Without sight, his other senses swell to terrifying proportions. He listens for the exact, crystalline pitch of the glowing steel as his hammer descends, a high, singing vibration that tells him when the iron is aligning, when the impurities are being driven out by his unwavering will. Every strike is a heartbeat. In this absolute isolation, his mortal desires, his hunger, his memories, his very name are stripped away, leaving behind only a pure, terrifying purpose. He is not just making a weapon, he is listening for the soul of the steel to find its voice in the blackness. As the final blow is struck, the hammer falls silent, and the cavern swallows the sound in a heavy, ringing stillness. A distant bell chimes from a monastery high above the mountain, its faint tolling the only reminder that a world still exists beyond these walls. The blade begins to cool in the darkness, its surface a mystery even to its creator. It waits in the shadows, a masterpiece of unseen geometry, yearning for a master who will never truly look upon the man who gave it life. But even a blade born in silence can be corrupted by the ambition of men, men who seek to fill the empty heart of a sword with something far more volatile and fluid than mere faith.
A single drop of liquid silver quivers on the lip of a blackened crucible, dancing with a frantic mercury light that reflects the fevered, bloodshot eyes of the alchemist. In this subterranean workshop, the air is not merely hot, it is heavy with a sweet metallic rot that clings to the back of the throat like a shroud. To the kings of the high courts, a sword is a symbol of justice, but to the desperate men who haunt these depths, a blade is a machine of physics and madness. They seek a weapon that defies the natural momentum of steel, a sword that strikes with a devastating, unnatural speed, moving faster than the human eye can track or the human mind can parry. To achieve this, the very spine of the broadsword is hollowed out, a channel of void carved into its iron heart.
We hear the distinct, heavy slosh of toxic quicksilver being poured into the blade's narrow throat, followed by the frantic, desperate hiss of a weld meant to trap the mercury forever. As the alchemist lifts the weapon, it does not sit still in his grip. The weight is erratic, shifting and surging toward the tip with every movement, as if the steel were a living, predatory thing trying to leap from his hand. This is the alchemy of frenzy, a balance designed to drive its wielder into an unholy rhythm of slaughter, where the blade's own momentum dictates the pace of the kill. The artisan leans over his anvil, a violent cough racking his chest as the poisonous vapors take their final toll. He wipes a smear of blood from his pale, receding gums, yet he smiles, a jagged, terrifying expression of triumph at the monstrosity he has birthed. The sword rests now upon the cooling stone, but it does not find peace. It vibrates with an internal sickness, a pendulum of madness that promises victory only at the cost of the user's sanity. It is a weapon that demands the mind break so that the body may conquer. Yet even this fluid, shifting horror is a refinement of art. There remain older, cruder ways to temper a blade, ways that do not rely on the cleverness of the chemist, but on the raw, terrifying heat of the executioner's block.
The sharp tang of rusted iron and dried salt hangs heavy in the stagnant air of the executioner's square, a place where the stones themselves seem to sweat with the memories of the departed. Here, at the end of all things, we find the final and most forbidden secret of the ancient smiths. It was a truth whispered only in the deepest pits of the Dark Ages, that the ultimate strength of a blade was not found in the purity of the fire, but in the violence of the cooling. We watch a towering figure, his face erased by a coarse burlap veil, drawing a heavy greatsword from the white-hot coals of a portable brazier. He does not reach for the wooden trough of brackish water, nor the vat of expensive linseed oil. Those are the tools of men who still believe in mercy. He turns instead toward a shackled shadow, a soul whose life has already been signed away by a king's ink. The core of this ritual is a grotesque alchemy of the living and the dead. As the executioner steps forward, he drives the incandescent steel, pulsing with a lethal sun-like radiance, directly into the living muscle of the condemned. He lets the warm fat and the pulsing blood of a human being temper the metal. There is a sickening, wet hiss that is instantly swallowed by an agonized cry, a sound so hollow it feels as if the square itself is screaming. In that horrific contact, the steel undergoes a terrifying transformation. It absorbs the raw, concentrated terror of the dying man, the rapid cooling against living tissue, hardening the iron into an unbreakable, diamond-sharp edge that no common forge could ever replicate. The blade emerges from the body not as a tool of defense, but as a monument to the ultimate violation of the flesh. It is now a weapon born of a scream, a piece of geometry so hardened by suffering that it will never dull, never chip, and never forget the heat of its first kill. As the body falls limp against the cold cobblestones, a heavy wooden door slams shut in the distance, the boom echoing through the empty alleyways like the final closing of a tomb. The echoes are trapped between the walls, much like the spirits we have followed through these 7 forbidden fires. We are left only with the silence of the steel, a silence that asks if the power of the blade was ever worth the price of the soul that forged it.